Welcome, everyone, to the Doha Forum panel on Afghan women as a source of Afghan stability. I'll just briefly tell you who's here with us. I'm Kim Dozier. I'm a CNN Global Affairs analyst. And next to me, I have Rina Amiri, who is the U.S. Special Envoy for Afghan women, girls, and human rights. And then we have Richard Bennett, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Afghanistan. Dr. Nilab Mobarez, the former Secretary General of the Afghan Red Crescent Society. And we have Dr. Ian Bickford, who's president of the American University of Afghanistan. Oh, I think that's a current position. Wonderful. It's still going. So I have warned my panelists that want to start with a lightning round question, but first let me set the scene. Since the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan, the space in which women and girls operate has become increasingly smaller, shrunken by bans on education, bans on where they are allowed to move publicly. And according to the U.S. Institute of Peace, the even the act of going outside with your male relative escort can still get you harassed for wearing the wrong color veil, the wrong color shoes. So that has led to a situation where 3 in 4 suicides are reported to be women who can't take the situation they're living in anymore. So, to start with the question that is on many minds back in DC, has the US and the Western led coalition let the women of Afghanistan down? Rena, I'll let you start. Yeah.
No, I think that that's a valid question. I do think that, what I hear from Afghan women is they were at the forefront of peace. They were at the forefront of just the inspiring changes that they saw in Afghanistan. And they do feel that given where they are right now, that they have been let down. And I think that that's a very legitimate feeling on the part of Afghan women. And we, the US, as well as all of the governments that I engage, recognize the responsibility, not just from a moral perspective, but also from a strategic perspective. Why is it important? And I don't think we should look at it simply through the lens of guilt, because I think that limits our vision. It is not about guilt. It is about strategy. It is about relevance. A country that is stripped of its women is a radicalized country. A country that is stripped of its women is a country that, within 5 years or less, it becomes a dramatically different country. It offers a future that is going to be a security concern, an economic concern that is not just going to be within the Afghan borders, it's going to bleed out into the region, and it's going to be the type of, I think, broader concern that will ultimately make the world come back to Afghanistan. And so rather than making that mistake of walking away from the Afghan people and Afghan women, we recognize that we have to work with Afghan women. They are the experts. And there's a reason why the US appointed a special envoy for Afghan women and girls, and a reason that many countries have said to the Taliban that there's no way that we are going to move forward in normalizing relations until they address the situation of Afghan women and respect the rights of the Afghan people.
Richard.
Yeah, I
Oh, and sorry, we're a handheld mics
handheld mic.
about
Working?
6 inches
Good.
away
Sorry.
for the translators.
Yeah. Um, when Afghan women are being diplomatic to me and others, they will use the word abandoned. When they are being perhaps speaking a little bit more directly, they will use the word betrayed. And I think that is speaking from the heart for many Afghan women. They feel betrayed by I don't like using this word international community. What is this thing? By powerful countries. And so I guess my answer is yes. But I also want to note that 75 years ago today, I think, as we're all aware, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by all the members of the United Nations. It applies to every state. It's a commitment by all states. There is to be no cherry picking of human rights. They are not for negotiation. And at the same time, there should be no double standards either. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Dr. Nilab, I'm going to have Ian go first and have you answer last. How do you think? How
Thank
would you
you.
answer the question?
Thank you, Kim. In the summer of 2021, it was written in the Atlantic that what was needed was imagination and preparation. And I do think that much of what happened was a failure of imagination and preparation. But I'll say a word about who didn't fail the people of Afghanistan. The United States Department of State have been great partners in continuing to support our students and others, and a majority women, with scholarships to continue their education, to bring many to safety in third countries. I'd like to thank Chargé Karen Decker for being here, as well as Special Envoy Amiri. The extraordinary civil servants at the United States Agency for International Development, through extraordinary effort and a great diplomacy with a fractured United States Congress, have continued funding at the level that they are permitted very ambitious educational programs for Afghan women and men, both in and outside of Afghanistan. The state of Qatar, and most especially the Qatar Fund for Development and the Qatar Foundation, intervened ahead of the fact to ensure that my institution and others, including the extraordinary robotics team, and I think that Roya is here, and I am so grateful to have been part of this initiative with her, had a footing and a home, and a warm embrace in the middle of an extraordinarily traumatic series of events. And today, AUAF hosts 200 students in Qatar, and many private donors and good-hearted people, many of them in this room. I should say, with regard to USAID, thank you to Mission Director Joel Sandifer for being here today. And as a result, the American University of Afghanistan, and I want to say we are one example among many of organizations, NGOs, educational and research organizations that have continued working against the grain and succeeding against the odds. As a result, my institution, as an example, enrolls more students than we were able to do before the dramatic change of fortune in Afghanistan. And for the first time in my university's history, a majority of those students are women. So there are, in the middle of great challenge, there are examples of successful efforts that we can point to. I think we can build upon them.
Dr. Nilab, you have just come from Afghanistan. That's where you're going back. How would you answer the question on behalf of the women that you meet and yourself?
Thank you, Ken. I would like to, first of all, I would like to say that I'm trying to talk on behalf of the silent majority of Afghanistan, which is huge, which are millions, and not only the two groups which are confronting each other every day through the medias, at least, and nervousness war is ongoing between both groups. I am from those who are the silent majority. And unfortunately, the majority of those silent people, those millions, did not benefit since the beginning of the progress. And what happened is that, although I think that you are still supporting, but will that support the result of that workforce who is amazing, I was in my life refugee during the Russian time, and now we have other refugees and asylum seekers across the world. There's a huge difference because of the education, because of the all what had happened in learning process not only through the schools and universities, but also on-job education, etc. But if they all leave, for whom we are educating Afghans? It's not for us. They will leave. And my address is to our own people. Think about what do you want? This is the question. And but now we should look to the future. What happened and has happened. What we can do for the future, for a better future. And I'm still optimistic.
What is it like for women living in Afghanistan right now? Can you describe daily life?
Uh, when I listen to the medias, it is part of the truth. There is another part also. I will take. Should I take with the bad or with the good?
Well, I mean,
The
how
bad, everybody knows about the bad. The bad is we are banned from the secondary school. It means that there won't be enough workforce in the future for my own sector, which is health. We were already in a bad baseline. We had only 35% of health workforce. Since 3 years, we have stopped to educate for health. And in few years, we will have no doctors because others will go to retirement or will leave the country. I should emphasize this that one of the main causes of migration today are secondary schools and universities for girls. A lot of people are saying this, and including in the rural areas, because I went to all these areas as all my positions that I had.
so
Everybody is for that.
so it is just to make sure I'm understanding, you're saying that there's an Afghan brain drain of women who can leave the country are.
There is a brain drain of not only women, but also men
Mm.
because of their daughters. So this is very important. This is extremely important. And I understand them because the education is something that Afghans came to a conclusion, all of them, including the current authorities,
Mm.
is education. They didn't say that they are banning, they say that they are postponing. But I'm tired of listening to postponement. Up to when?
Yeah,
We cannot wait.
didn't they
Your
do that the
daughters,
last
your
time?
wives, your sisters, your mothers will die. I will tell you a story of myself and then I leave it. I was a stagiaire in medical school, and one of my patients, a man, asked me, please stay after the visit. So I stayed, and he told me that I have a private thing to tell you. He said, my daughter-in-law has a breast cancer. When you will become a full doctor to operate her? And I said, don't wait for that because I need 3 more years of residency. She will die. He told me, I don't care. She can die, but I want a female doctor. Now I'm asking to the new authorities of Afghanistan, ITA, you know that this is still ongoing in Afghanistan in the rural areas and in the urban areas. Are you leaving us to die from a cancer because there is no doctor?
Richard, you have been speaking directly to the Taliban in negotiations. What is driving this attitude towards women that shrinks their space? Is it fear of economic competition? Is it ignorance of what they can bring to the economy? What do they tell you?
No, I mean, the former minister of education is here. The problem is much more of, having, in my sense, we don't have a school as we understand as a school.
Mm.
We have schools that are in the gardens and in the desert, anywhere. We have a huge young population,
And they need to be taught.
and we need two things: modern child health and education. And we don't have enough schools. Everybody knows that we don't have even 50% of the schools. A girl in the rural area must go 4 kilometers to reach a school. Well, my colleagues, my Afghan colleagues, will you leave your daughters to go 4 kilometers when she has 16 years old or 12 years old, or she's a young girl,
So
to go to the school?
I can
Are
see
you okay with that? Or it is better to go to a madrasa, which is close by?
I can see what you're saying. There's a problem with access to schools as well as permission to go. So I'd like to turn to the um, negotiation side of this. Richard, you have talked directly with the Taliban. What reasons do they give for this policy? And when you try to push back, what do they say?
I think that one of the strengths of the Taliban is their long-term unity, that they regard staying unified as critical. And that has brought them to what they would see as a power to success in their view. On this issue of education, however, I do not think there's unity. We've seen that in some public statements, and Dr. Mubarak mentioned that they talk about postponing or they talk about suspending education. I think there's a reason for that, and there's several reasons, but one of them is they are not unified on this issue. I remember having a meeting with the Minister of Higher Education. This was a while back, at the time when women were still able to study in university. And he had a kind of technical discussion with me. He said he didn't contest whether or not women should study at university. It was the issue of how to do it in a segregated way. And he said, look, they had an internal discussion that either they would have, men for half the day and women for half the day, so they didn't have to meet each other, or they would do 3 days a week each. And they decided to do the 3 days a week each. But if they had the resources to have enough buildings, enough teachers, and so on, then they would run parallel programs. He was removed a little bit after that, a few months later, because I hear because his views were considered too progressive by Kandahar.
Even though he wanted to keep them separate.
Yes, segregation separate wasn't enough.
And to that larger question, if I could just follow up, why is it not just religious need to separate the sexes, but is it economically? Is that why they banned women from so many public spaces?
I don't think it's economically either. I think
So it's
that
not competition for jobs.
no, I think it's um, the fear that educated women will not go along with the Taliban's ideology, and that they educated women will influence their children, boys and girls. I think it's a fear of that in part.
Rena, are you able to talk to them directly?
Yes, and I talked to them exactly on these issues, on the devastating edicts that they've put in place. It's between 50 and 80 that have stripped women of rights across levels. We're talking about education now, but it's education, work, public space, participation, just travel, mobility. Uh, I don't think that it's economic. Certainly not, because the UN assesses that Afghanistan has lost over $1 billion in revenue, and in fact, it's devastating the country and it's taking food off the table. I don't think it's religion. I was just at the OIC Women in Islam conference in Jeddah, where 57 countries came out and said this is contrary to the sacred religion of Islam. It is politics. It is and it's not Afghan politics. It's Taliban politics, and I believe it's the Taliban's posture, not internally to Afghanistan, but externally to also other hardline elements, to show that they are the most pure and the most hardline element. And it doesn't resonate with the Afghan population because the majority of the Afghan population challenge this. They say this is not Afghan culture, and even uh, people, whether it's elders or community leaders across the country, have rejected this narrative that this has anything to do with religion or culture in Afghanistan.
Now, everyone else has mentioned resources. Could offering them resources be a carrot? Is there a carrot or a stick that could get the government to change this policy?
Uh, there are many sticks right now that are being used. The Taliban are sanctioned to the teeth. The Taliban are not able to get a lot of the economic assistance that they have asked for to go through the government. They want diplomatic engagement, and there's diplomatic engagements insofar as trying to improve the situation in Afghanistan and address key interests, but they have a travel ban in place. There are many things that they want, the UN seat, all of that is off the table. We have, last year when I sat down with him, we thought that we were making some progress in terms of addressing what they said would be required in order to open schools. We even, they said segregated schools. We said, okay, we know that the schools in Afghanistan are already segregated, but okay, let's hear you out. And we sat down and talked at a technical level about all the things that would need to be addressed and what type of resources would be required. And those resources were on the table. At the end of the day, on the day that school was supposed to be opened, they reversed that decision and then they went on to close universities as well. So it's certainly not about resources. It is, again, about internal politics among the Taliban.
And yet, Ian, you're running a university. So how are you doing it? How do you reach your students? Is it all online?
Yeah, AUAF enrolled several hundred students online who are presently in Afghanistan. It's very interesting. It's well known that we're doing this. We actively recruit new students in country, and for reasons that I can only guess at, we haven't been challenged in doing this, and our students haven't been challenged for studying. We work very hard to maintain their anonymity, but our students themselves often speak about the education they're receiving and how powerful it is. Um, the um, the power of connected learning, which is my preferred term for online learning, is one of many efforts that need to be ongoing in Afghanistan. And many implementers in the room here, it's about a lot of actors all continuing to provide the forms of education that we can. Um, I, in this kind of work, and I think everybody here understands it, you learn quickly to abide uncertainty. We don't know what will happen, but I'd like to distill a little bit, some of just in a few seconds, some of the ideas that came out of a workshop yesterday on education in Afghanistan that were very practical, direct, straightforward. And so there are three efforts that need to either continue or begin. First, we need to continue supporting and implementing both online and community education in Afghanistan through the means that are at our disposal. Second, we need to identify those exemptions and potential exemptions where women are allowed to study, including some areas of medical studies and a strong potential for technical fields in accounting, business management, and IT. We need to use those wedges to begin to restore programming in country and gradually widen those wedges. And three, we need to continue to use all of the diplomatic levers that Special Envoy Amiri is describing. And with that joint effort, which requires all of us, we may see progress.
With that, I would like to open up to questions from the audience. Do I have my mic runners in place? Uh, Bilquis, could I ask you to ask the first question in the front row? And we just have to wait for the microphones when I call on you because that helps the translators as well. And keep the microphone about 6 inches away from your mouth.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Balkis Ahmadi. I work with USIP on Afghanistan programs. And my question would be to Special Envoy Amiri. The Taliban have issued more than 140 decrees, edicts, letters, and circulars that have to do with women. 90 of them are specific to women. The others have to do with removing institutions and protection mechanisms that were in place. When you meet with the Taliban, oh, and they have issued at least 2 decrees that are somehow in favor of women. Surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, those are the 2 decrees that are not being enforced. When you talk to them, do you also talk about those decrees and the short-term, mid-term, and long-term impact of those policies on women and on the society? Thank you.
Yes, I think it's important to talk to the Taliban um, from their lens. I don't talk about it from their human rights obligations. I talk to them about their goals for Afghanistan, economic goals in terms of stabilizing the country. I say that this is a golden opportunity to really end the conflict meaningfully. And I note to them in all the ways that this is crippling Afghan society. And in the long term, that in my very first meeting with the Taliban when I took this position, I said that the conflict is on pause. It has not ended. And the more that you deny the Afghan population of its desires to move towards economic stabilization and peace, which is what Afghans want at this point. They are willing to make sacrifices for that. But if you put them in a position where they can no longer put food on the table and they are moving back towards instability, you will lose. And I said, look at the last 20 years. It's not just about unity, but it's every group that has tried to maintain monopoly of power and that has gone against the wishes of the people and has done things that have undermined the welfare of the people. They have lost the confidence of the people and they have lost power.
Question in the first row, right here.
Thank you. Should I introduce myself? I'm Manija Wafiq. I'm the founder of Afghanistan Women's Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and currently working through my small nonprofit with Afghan businesswomen inside the country. My question is to Richard, but just before asking my question, because this issue of Afghan women is very close to my heart, and it's very heart-wrenching to see how after the 20 years of work that all of us put together, Afghans and our international allies, and the accomplishments that we achieved. And today, after that, we are here speaking on the basics. And still, we are not able, after 2 years, to take any action to change the situation. And the accomplishments that I want to highlight a few for a number of audience here are that millions of girls were going to school, and their families, by the way, because culture and religion is being reasoned by the Taliban that it's Afghanistan and families are not supporting girls' education, but families were supporting their millions of their girls' education. And our girls in higher education, universities, the the percentage of graduates, female graduates from last time when the Taliban were thrown and the interim government came into existence, the percentage of female higher education graduates from 15, 16% increased throughout these years to nearly 25% throughout the country, not only in Kabul.
That's a great reminder, but there are a few other questions. So what is your question?
And as well as we are talking about an Afghanistan where women made 27% of the parliament, 25% of the provincial councils, 50% of community councils at the village level. And we are talking about a country where women had become part of every sphere of life in that country: media, sports, business, and all kinds of non traditional and male dominant sectors, you all name it. Afghan women had become part of it. And so the question is, how can international community pressure Taliban and themselves as well, international community themselves, to really take immediate actions and to change this situation? We have lost 2 years of our girls' education, and we are not going to have doctors, not because of brain drain, because of the education, because our girls are not going to higher education.
Thank you so much. Well, Rena, you spoke a little bit about how there are lots of sticks being used. You were offering resources for education. Um, is there anything else that could reach? And Richard, I'll ask you as well.
I think, we spend so much time talking about the international community, but ultimately it is the Afghan population that is going to bear pressure on the Taliban. It is right now where you see that there are educational opportunities, work opportunities for women. It's where the community has pushed back against the Taliban. So I think what we need to think about is how do we empower the Afghan population, and that doesn't require waiting for the Taliban. We need to, as was said in the education workshop yesterday, organized by Indonesia and Qatar, unban the ban is our motto, the bans. But in the meantime, we need to put everything that is at our disposal to empower the Afghan population, give them education in whatever means possible, get creative, help with employment. Let's listen to Afghans who are taking extraordinary risks and doing very creative, finding creative workarounds, which ultimately is a short-term solution, but let's empower them. Let's figure out how to put our resources to helping Afghans get the tools that they need to stand up against the Taliban and to equip themselves with education and work.
Richard, what are some of your tools that you try to use to get them to listen?
Well, first of all, I agree that we're not only talking about the absence of education, we're talking about the removal of women from public life as a whole. So I do think we have to broaden the discussion. And I mentioned for a reason that human rights are universal, indivisible, interdependent. We, there should be no cherry picking. And so we need to take forward the whole package. I do agree with Rena that the Taliban appear to care most about their own internal constituencies. They that is where they will remain in power or not, largely. And that's also why, in response to your first question, I mentioned that this could be this area of education is a kind of fraught one, and not only now, as was mentioned this morning. Education in Afghanistan has been a political hot potato for 100 years. Well, actually more, since 1919, but the constitution, the first constitution was 100 years ago. And it's been it's been a battlefield since then. So I agree with both sticks and carrots. And I will be the one that raises the issue of accountability. And I am not focusing only on accountability for the last 2 and a bit years, but in fact, Afghanistan, through 45 years of conflict, has developed a culture of impunity there have been very few consequences for wrongdoing, for serious criminal conduct. And so there needs to be accountability. I'm pleased that the International Criminal Court is investigating Afghanistan, has been for about a year now, and other
You
forms
mean
of attack.
investigating the NATO forces and what they did there?
They're not. They're investigating they could do, but the prosecutor strategy has chosen to investigate um, the Taliban and ISKP essentially. Um, I mentioned also earlier that I don't agree with double standards, that or raising the issue of double standards. So I think accountability also needs to be at the national level. And I applaud those countries that have started to undertake accountability internally themselves. There are 3 or 4 that we may be aware of. And I think also universal jurisdiction should be used. And as well as that, there are initiatives, or there may be initiatives, to use the International Court of Justice in relation to violations of the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which would require one state taking Afghanistan, another state, to the World Court.
So, in other words, leading members of the Taliban being sanctioned, prosecuted for their actions against women, their policies.
Um, Gender persecution is already a crime against humanity. It has been on the books of the Rome Statute for more than 20 years. It's been very rarely used, but it was there. It is there for a reason. It's already a crime. Some people have also been raising more recently the issue of gender apartheid. That is not yet an international crime, but it could be in the future. It could be included, for example, in a new treaty on crimes against humanity. And it is certainly a rallying cry and a political movement.
Another question, this side of the room, the lady in the red veil. And if you could introduce yourself.
Hello and salam to everyone. My name is Shohra Kufi and I'm a UCL graduate in Education and International Development. My question is to Ms. Rina Amiri. What is your definition of inclusiveness or inclusivity? And how can you ensure that the US engages with all sides and women from all walks of life, especially those that have been affected by the Taliban's oppressive measures and those that have been the victim of the Taliban's presence? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Inclusivity is an important question, and I'm going to speak a little bit broader to what you noted, because many countries are speaking about the need for inclusivity and pushing the Taliban on inclusivity, but they're speaking about there are different definitions. I think many in the region speak of political inclusivity. Some talk of ethnic inclusivity, and not enough actually speak about the inclusivity in respect to over 50% of the population that's being has been erased. And when I talk about inclusivity, it's all of the above. It's inclusivity in terms of Afghans inside the country, Afghans who have been forced into exile, and are also in a situation where they're trying to find ways to improve the situation inside the country. It's ethnic groups like Hazaras in particular who are in a facing an escalating attacks and a devastating situation, as well as many other minority groups. It is human rights defenders. It is there's 40 million Afghans right now, and then the Afghans outside, who, as Neil Abjan said, that the silent majority, and we have to find ways to bring in the silent majority into our discussions. There are many of us that have set up consultative mechanisms and platforms. And what we're trying to do is, in every meeting that I have where special envoys and meetings are gathered on Afghanistan, I say that it is our responsibility to bring in Afghan voices into the room, because we cannot speak on behalf of Afghans. We have to leverage their voices. We have to bring in their expertise. Ultimately, Afghans are the best judges of what is required and what can be done in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Just want to take in the front row, just a second. Please wait for the microphone and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Siti Rohaini Zuhayatin. I'm from Indonesia, from the Office of the President of the Indonesia. We've been engaging with many groups of Afghanistan before Taliban took power. So it has been like 3-4 years before that, because it meant to be kind of the preparations for transformation of the power and the times, and learning from what Mr. Richard Bennett told us about the identity constructions that it is meant by Taliban. So our question is, and it is also related to how Indonesia has been engaging for all, and also the Taliban in the past. What country that Taliban's ever revere as the kind of the reference for such a kind of the implementations of what is called the Islam Taliban. So if it is possible, then we can extend that as kind of the opportunity for those countries to engage with Taliban. And we still have, I mean, our ulama is still also have some connections actually to the ulama in Taliban, and if it is also possible that it will be continue talking to them about the authenticity of Islam, that is actually favorable for Taliban. Thank you very much.
May I ask, since
Yes.
Indonesia is a strongly Muslim country and values women's education,
Yes.
have you managed to reach anyone in the Taliban administration to open this discussion?
Not after the recent taking power, but before that, we have many groups, including Taliban, for the ulama, the Muslim, the youth, coming to Indonesia, and I myself facilitating one of their workshop for Afghan women, including also the Taliban. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Richard also.
No, I just want to recognize Indonesia, and particularly Foreign Minister Marsudi, who has been such a strong leader in this front and has engaged the Taliban consistently in private messaging, but on public, consistently supporting the rights of Afghan women and girls. And we'd really like to recognize and applaud that.
Richard, have you been able to invite any sort of Islamic scholar as an interlocutor to help hammer some of your points home?
In fact, I think it's more important for Islamic scholars to be engaging not on my behalf, but rather as Indonesia is doing already. I think that, for example, Indonesia, and again, I think I agree with Rina Amiri that Foreign Minister Masudi has played a very strong leadership role. Indonesia is already playing a kind of bridging role in this respect. And if I'm not wrong, there is already a trilateral ulema dialogue with Indonesia and Qatar and the Taliban. So this is, I think, could be a promising area for the engagement of ulema. But my understanding is that at the moment, the engagement tends to be with the more progressives, even if there is such a thing, even
The
within
progressive
Afghanistan.
Taliban.
Progressive ulama in Afghanistan, I wouldn't say within Taliban. But the hard nut to crack are the more kind of ultra conservatives based out of Kandahar. And I think that is something that Indonesia and others I really applaud to continue to try that and to persist. And it's probably a step-by-step process.
Yes.
Just add a couple of other actors that we have to acknowledge. The government of Qatar has been an extraordinary leader in this front, engaging the Taliban, particularly on education and trying to move that forward in a constructive way. The OIC has played a very strong role in trying to engage the Taliban and moving them in a positive direction. The UAE, the last time that the Taliban were in power, Muslim majority countries did not engage in a meaningful way to try to reverse these positions. And now I do feel that Muslim majority countries are taking a very important role.
Dr. Nilab, are you seeing the results of this outreach on the ground? Even some beginning results?
I think it's very important. I agree also that there are two views within the leadership of the Taliban in Afghanistan. But I'd like to raise another point that during the war, uh, up to 2021, there was a huge propaganda which was uh, coming from in our neighboring countries and targeting the foot soldiers of the Taliban. And their narrative was that Americans are changing our women and they are educating them in a Western way, etc., etc. You know all these things. And that propaganda, which was completely wrong in terms of Islam and our education in Islam, and all our schools, there were more Islamic education in our curriculum than my time when I was in school. So this narrative is something that we are paying for. This propaganda, which can have only Islamic answer to solve it, is real. And foot soldiers who are completely probably illiterate, and I remind here the difference of the rural area and urban area, and the fact that they left completely out of education, but they had they were under this propaganda. Even 2 days ago, one of the political leaders of one of our neighbors was saying, no, that is Islamic, etc., etc. So we can get the support of Islamic countries, including Indonesia, Qatar, Malaysia, and other countries to to respond to this wrong propaganda and change it with Islamic education, which is targeting the foot soldiers. Otherwise, the hardliners will continue this, and the softliners, if I can say, could not stop them and could not convince them that it is wrong. While all of us here know that it's absolutely non-Islamic.
So
The first verse of Quran Sharif is starting with Iqra بِاسْمِ رَبِّكَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ. Iqra means read. So we have to address this issue, otherwise the other point is that the professor said, I think that in the 21st century, we can use technology and online education. Absolutely. And also changing the curriculum towards more focused on, as you said, also on, on the family, but also the basic, for example, health. Today, we can have telemedicine and it is so easy, and they are not banning the internet. We have full access to internet when we have money. If we have tablets, we can. Currently we have 1100 girls' schools out of the secondary school, it is only 40%. We have many more. So imagine this, we can do that, and this is a solution. A solution until they come up also with a solution, and then we can make the exams of the, for accrediting what they have learned, and we will take the gap. But and what we can do, but targeting those foot soldiers is key.
So basically, our time is up. So I'll wrap up with saying that to sum up your argument, uh, the Taliban and its followers need to learn that educating women, allowing women's rights, is not a Western right, it's a human right.
It's an Islamic right. What the Taliban are afraid of is not that you would, even the sanctions, even, we have a lot of mechanisms, international mechanisms, because Afghanistan has signed almost all the conventions. That will not work on the Taliban. What will work on the Taliban that we, the people who are inside Afghanistan, say we are fed up and we are all ready.
And with that, thank you so much to all of our panelists and thank you for attending.